There was one injury in particular that happened at practice that I think is going to have a massive effect on this season.
Right. I think the outlook for the Chargers this year, as it was kind of last year in the first year of Jim Harbaugh, was that they have two of the best tackles in football. And that, unfortunately, is no longer the case. Rashawn Slater goes down with a pretty severe knee injury, I believe, or leg injury. And pretty immediately, the Chargers announced that he will be out for the season after undergoing corrective surgery. That's a big deal. And I think when you really lean into some of these tackle injuries, you also think of Tristan Wirfs, who should miss some weeks of the season, particularly for these teams that, are probably around a 10-win projection, are probably going to be one of the better teams in the league, but not necessarily a clear division winner. That means a lot. I am a big proponent in this two tackle theory that if you have two tackles that are excellent, you automatically have a good offense as long as the quarterback can keep the trains running. And it really changes the outlook for a team that is known for struggling with, wide receivers, does have an excellent quarterback, a top tier quarterback in my belief, but has some questions at running back with Najee Harris missing time and a rookie in Marion Hampton being in the backfield. So I think there's so many questions in the skill position room, but I think their loss of the two tackle theory here is going to be a real big difference.
100%. So big. I remember around the end of the year last year when we were having conversations about all pro and that kind of stuff. Or actually it was Pro Bowl because Joe Alt was leading in the Pro Bowl votes at tackle. And my argument at the time was he's not the best tackle on his team, right? How many teams can you even have that conversation about whether you agree with the statement or not? Like they're both so good. So a strength turns into I wouldn't say a weakness, but not a strength.
Exactly. And I think to literally put a number on it, there's probably 5 teams total, including the Chargers, that you can say that 2 of their tackles are good. You list them off. It's the Eagles, the Vikings, the Bucks, the Lions, and the Bills. Those are 5 of the top 10 teams in the league. And so it's just such a different class of team when you have those two, particularly for a team that struggled a little bit in the running game last year, particularly after injuries. It's going to change the calculus of that team. I personally believe that it's not going to be as negative as it was when the Vikings lost Christian Darrisaw last year. And we kind of saw Sam Darnold, the wheels start to fall off ultimately now in a Seahawks uniform. Yeah. I don't think that's going to be the case with Justin Herbert. I think Justin Herbert is miles and miles and miles more talented than Sam Darnold, at least out as it stands right now. But for an injury, prone quarterback as well, who's known to miss a game or two during the year, it also makes a big difference.
There are a few other injuries that I think are worth just talking about briefly. We got an update on Darnell Mooney out of Atlanta that is not necessarily, I wouldn't attach the word optimistic to it. We're hearing, the phrases week to week being attached to him. We'll have him back healthy this year.
Not ideal.
Not great. What does that do to the Falcons if they don't have him?
So I think the way that you pick up on these injuries preseason is how they affect the element of the team. We talked about the two tackle theory a little bit. There's also a real research behind the idea that you need a quality third receiver to be a quality offense. And I think that the real ascendance for the Falcons last year and the reason that they were able to keep their head above water when Kirk Cousins wasn't playing super well, and then why Michael Penix looked really good, was that they had 3 or 4 really premium receiving options, if you include Bijan Robinson. That's obviously Kyle Pitts as the third receiver, Drake London as the superstar number 1, and then Darnell Mooney quietly was getting into the top 30 wide receivers by way of target share and yards per route run, despite being looked at as a career, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 while he was with the Bears. So he quietly crept into a certified wide receiver 2 in this league and probably one of the best Z's in the league when you really look at it. And if they don't have him, the cupboards are bare. We're talking about Ray McCloud, Cardero Hodge, guys who have not contributed at that level ever in their career. And that makes a massive difference when you have what is realistically a rookie quarterback coming in to a situation where they're expected to be a team that challenges for the NFC South. And I think when you lose that third wide receiver, it makes things a heck of a lot easier to defend Drake London There's already the questions about Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson is looked at as one of the best fantasy players. When you can really only focus on two of those guys now, it makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, he had a target share of 21%.
It's
pretty high, I
surprising.
think, to attach to his specific name. I don't think that you would have necessarily thought that would be that as high.
I think when he was signed by the Falcons, a lot of people were like, that was interesting. That seems a little bit high. And then as the season went on, it became one of the best value contracts in the league when you're considering what a guy like Devontae Smith is being paid, a guy like T. Higgins are being paid, who are obviously slightly above him in terms of these metrics, but are in the same class of a certified second receiver. It became an excellent value contract. I really would love to see him healthy so that we can have a full strength Falcons offense for Michael Penix.
He had a higher yards per route run than Calvin Ridley, which isn't to say it was like a mind-blowingly high yards per route run. It was 2, but still, yeah. So he played well, and that could be a big loss. And by the way, I love that you included Kyle Pitts in the order in which you did, because I'm not sure he belongs there. Still waiting for Kyle Pitts to prove that he's good. So another guy, speaking of, I mentioned Calvin Ridley, speaking of the Titans, Tyjae Spears got hurt. I thought that he was interesting this weekend in a few ways. One, it was Pollard with the starters, and then Tyjae Spears came in, and then he got hurt with a high ankle sprain. So first it was a clear 1 and 2 situation. And then the 2, who we were wondering like what kind of role he might have, got hurt. And so high ankle sprain, I mean, that feels like a big loss. This might be more of like a fantasy football note in terms of identifying a backfield where it looks like it's pretty much going to go through one guy, whereas we previously thought it might be multiple backs or something like that. So Tony Pollard maybe gets a little bit of a boost there. I don't want to frame it like that. Like, guy got hurt, and so good news for him.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people, particularly folks who like drafting wide receivers in fantasy drafts early, try to hunt out true value at the running back position. And I think that Tyjae Spears was someone who I had circled and who, when we plugged a lot of data into some pretty sophisticated models, was above the ADP where we thought he was versus where his ADP was, because he is targeted a lot in that offense and they utilize him quite a bit in the passing game as well. And the thesis obviously would be that Tony Pollard is growing a year older. Perhaps, he loses a step. He had a pretty good year last year. Obviously, injuries are always a question for running backs, and that Tyjae Spears could really step in his third year and be a contributor both in the passing and the running game. And I think we've seen the kernels of that in previous years. And I think this year really could have been the fruition in which, if you were, diving deep for value in late rounds, you could have picked up Tyjae Spears and all of a sudden he has 4 or 5 pretty solid fantasy weeks. I really want to see how he recovers from this injury, particularly at the running back position, because it can change the face of a Titans offense, which, frankly, you look at their depth chart, you look at their offensive line, a lot of investment has gone into it. You look at Moore, you look at Latham, you look at some of the interior linemen, Zietler, who they picked up, who I had as an all-pro last year. There's a lot of investment going into that. When you pair it with a rookie quarterback, it could have some upside for the offense as compared to, the 32nd ranked offense, which they basically were last year.
Sort of, well, not similar or similar, but in different ways. Rachaad White hurt his groin. So
that's very interesting to me in particular, given our discussions about Bucky Irving. I know you did, and ask me anything that folks can go find on Reddit right now. Lindsay, excellent answers. We talk all the time and we text. And it's very interesting. We get so deep that it's often interesting to see other people ask you questions, not just me, because it's interesting to see your thought patterns. And we have been the Bucky Irving fan club over here. I personally think the best spot to draft this year is the 7th spot, because you can double dip in value by picking up perhaps a wide receiver who has some injury concerns like AJ Brown or Puka Nacua, who probably has, literal number 1 wide receiver ranked upside. And then you can go back in the 2nd round and pick up a Bucky Irving, who I think could potentially be the best running back. The Rachaad White news does make a big difference there.